Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome to the live recording of another episode of Marketing Scoop. This is going to be episode 30 of season 2 of the show. We'll get going with the content proper just in a couple of minutes' time. We've already got quite a few people watching us live. So if you're watching us live, fantastic to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us here. We're going to be talking about some incredible content marketing campaigns from Uber and also Search Engine Journal. So if you've got any questions in relation to long-term content marketing campaigns, what kinds of things that you should be doing, let us know in the chat. But first of all, let us know where in the world you're joining us from. Let us know a little bit about you. Are you a content marketer? Do you tend to focus on that as your primary digital marketing activity? Or do you do other things? Are you mostly an SEO and wanting to find out more about content marketing strategy? Tell us a little bit about you and who you are and what you want to get out of this live show, and we'll try and incorporate some of your requests into what we're going to discuss. But just before we get going proper, we've had a few things happen over the last few days in terms of news, and Judith discovered a great story happened at Google I/O. Judith, what happened there?
So Google made an announcement that a lot of people got very excited about. And of course, all our podcast listeners and any podcasters out there will be excited about as well, I hope, which is that Google is going to start indexing podcasts and return audio results in the SERPs. So that means that voice answers are going to come direct from clips of audio content, probably. So, we have featured snippets. So now when you say, okay, Google, and then ask them some random question, it could actually come from a podcast instead. And one of the things that they're actually already doing with YouTube, I don't know if you've seen this, is if you do a search in Google, in the search results for Google, you'll get a video clip, and it will actually take you to the point in the video that the clip is related to your search. So the bit in the video that is related to what you just searched for me, chocolate chip cookie recipes, it will take me directly to the point in the YouTube video click where they actually start making the chocolate chip cookies, rather than the preamble that most videos seem to have these days of what they were doing laundry with and how many socks they found in the dryer. And then they talk about the chocolate chip cookie recipe. So that's already happening with video. And now we're going to get it in podcasts.
I have more boring examples, because when I was doing a digital marketing course, the example that I put together was how to tie a tie. And if you search Google for that, then there's a video clip that starts at the very start of the tie tying instead of the general preamble.
Exactly, yeah. So we don't have to know about how many different tie knots there are and who invented the Windsor knot and whether it's related to the Windsors or Windsor Castle or anything. We just want to know how to tie a tie.
Indeed. And so we've got a few people, as I said, watching us live already. William Rocks in the chat as usual. Great to have you here, William. Akishit Singh is saying SEO focus on content. He's from Ontario, Canada. Need to learn how to distribute content for link building and marketing in general. So yeah, content's at the heart of a lot of things. So other people watching, there's quite a few people watching. Let us know a little bit about what kind of activities you're doing. It'll give us a feel of what you do, and because of that, hopefully we can tailor what we discuss to the things that are likely to resonate with you, or the things that you're likely to be interested in. But we're going to start recording the audio podcast just now. This is the point where we're going to be releasing the audio podcast episode. I will tell you just quickly before we do that, if you're not already a podcast subscriber, head over to semrush.com/podcast, and there's loads of links there depending on what podcatcher you happen to use, iTunes, Android, something else, and you can click on one of those links, subscribe to the audio show, and make sure you get the audio show sent to your podcatcher whenever it's released. Dilruk is a digital campaign manager based in London. William Rock, internet marketing specialist based in Kansas City, USA. We've got someone else from Kansas City on, but we'll do the proper introduction to you, Kelsey, just in a second. So here we get going with a proper podcast intro. Marketing Scoop Season 2, Episode 30, How Uber and Search Engine Journal Do Content Marketing. Brought to you by Semrush, this is Marketing Scoop. I'm David Bain.
And I'm Judith Lewis, and welcome to the Semrush show that reveals the latest digital trends and technologies that impact your marketing strategy.
Together with industry experts, we delve into SEO advertising and content marketing to uncover the ultimate recipe for digital marketing success. Now, our first guest is a lady who loves great ideas and helping brands reach their potential. She's the founder and chief marketing strategist of 6 Stories, a Kansas City-based digital marketing consultancy, as well as StoryShout, the first and only news content marketing agency. Welcome, Kelsey Jones.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Next up is a highly versatile SEO and digital marketing expert. He's also the Web and SEO Lead for Uber in Latin America. Please welcome Luis Rodriguez.
Hi, everyone. Very happy to be with you.
Well, I'm going to stick with you first, Luis. So can you tell us a little bit about Uber's safety and access campaign?
Yes, definitely. So during the last 12 months or so, we have been identifying that there was a lot of different gaps and concerns from our drivers and riders in terms of safety. As we know, it has been a bit of a trendy topic, unfortunately, in which we feel the responsibility actually to provide more guidance and to provide a lot more information about what are the safety measures that we are following, given that safety and access is one of our pillars for the last 12 months as well. We want to make sure that we communicate that safety is one of our main concerns for our drivers and riders. So that's a little bit of the intro. And during the last 12 months, we have been really leveraging a lot about different SEO content and web components so we can get that message out there.
So you're doing it through a lot of different channels, because I know I've noticed in the app here in Toronto, I'm being fed a lot more information about safety, but that's in app. So how are you pushing this content out so that it's more widely seen?
Yes, definitely. So as I was saying, we are trying to make a very comprehensive and aligned message that we're sending out there, right? So part of the app information that you can see is also part of the information that we're distributing via social media, via our blog, which is mainly focused into bringing that extra information that would bring the benefit of feeling safe in your ride, right? Either being a driver or rider. So going from very basic topics, from like, what are the safe spots where I can wait for my Uber, right? What are the night guidelines for behavior? What should I do in this situation? So we are really leveraging pretty much a 360 digital marketing there, in which I'm leading the web and SEO part at the moment.
Oh, fantastic. I know it's not SEO, but with the content marketing side of things, are you also looking at any paid promotion to expand the visibility of that message that you're getting out through SEO means?
Yes, definitely. So the way that we are connecting SEO, SEM, and basically the distribution of the content that we're creating is that we have very specific ways of understanding how people are concerned. What are the concerns of people, right? So maybe people would try to understand, is it safe to go out at night in Mexico City, right? And that's a topic that we are actually addressing via content marketing and distributing in different influence channels or in different networks, so we can get that message out there in the proper ways that we can see in websites, right? So I think that it has been a very nice connection between both.
Luis, what are your main goals for that particular campaign? Because it's a great piece of content, it's a great useful piece of content, but how do you really measure its financial success?
Right. So there are a couple of ways that we can understand the success of this, right? I mean, the first one being awareness on how aware are people on our safety measures, basically, right? Like, what is the actual behavior and guidelines that you should follow up? And that is measured via different research that our research team is helping us out to understand how well is the message there. Another one would be incremental trips, right? So as we were saying, this is kind of like tag along with access, which is about promoting different ways of moving around the city. So if we understand that a person is having certain kind of usage of your product, and then they start using it for a different occasion, that's where we understand that that we have certain kind of success. Now, speaking more relatively about SEO and internally, we also want to dominate that SERP, right? We want to make sure that we become a trustable site and an authority almost to speak about safety on the road, to speak about safety in ride sharing. So there's a bit of a mix between financial or like business impact and also content marketing metrics, so to speak.
Kelsey, you've obviously been involved in quite a few lengthy content marketing campaigns, but one in particular that we're going to talk about today is, can you tell us a little bit about the podcast that you launched at Search Engine Journal and how you integrated that into live events?
Yeah, definitely. So I was executive editor at SEJ for over 2 years. And during that time, we launched Search Engine Nerds, which still goes on today. So if you guys want another podcast to check out, in addition to Marketing Scoop, give that one a try. So we launched it knowing that podcasts were really popular, especially among marketers, as you guys, I'm sure, see it at Semrush. So at the same time, we were also developing a conference series called SEJ Summit. And so we wanted to figure out a way to kind of integrate those and help one market the other and vice versa. So what we started doing is the speakers that were going to speak at SEJ Summit, we would have them on as guests to promote the conference beforehand. And then also afterward, if there was a lot of good feedback about their topic, we might have them on for another episode after the event was over. Another cool thing we did is we ended up repurposing some of the video interviews we did at PubCon, and we turned them into mini episodes on our podcast. So even though we were releasing these videos on our YouTube channel, we also took, the audio that you guys, kind of what you guys are doing right now with this recording, and turned it into mini-sodes on Search Engine Nerds.
So
Oh,
also in
that's
the YouTube chat, we've got William Rock saying, wow, another fellow Kansas City person.
I know,
That's
what are the
awesome.
odds?
He's saying, we'll have to get coffee together one day. Well, there you go. There's an offer of you.
Yeah.
And he
so,
shared the URL as well for Search Engine Nerds.
yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
You can get
awesome.
that in the
Thank
chat.
you.
Yeah. Kelsey, I mean, you mentioned offline events there. Was that one of the key objectives of the podcast, to try and get more people attending offline events?
Yeah, exactly. So one cool thing we did is we didn't have sponsors on the Search Engine Nerds podcast. So we kind of made ourselves our own sponsors. So we ran a promo, which I had to record, which I hated doing, by the way, because I know everybody hates the sound of their own voice. But we did a promo for SEJ Summit, and we had an exclusive promo code for listeners of the Search Engine Nerds podcast. And so that way it let us, since it was an exclusive code, it let us track what registrations we were getting from the podcast, and to kind of figure out if that was a viable option for our future events or in any other initiatives we might have.
Are you able to share whether or not it worked?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the exact numbers, but we did get some registrations using that code. And we didn't place any restrictions on it. We said you could share it with someone who, didn't listen to that episode, because we knew that it was still coming from that podcast. And so I don't remember exact numbers. I mean, it wasn't our primary traffic driver, but we did get sales from it, which is really cool.
It's a really good way of tracking things, and it sort of leads me into a question that I was wondering about, which is just, how do you measure the success of a podcast? Because we've asked Luis about how he was measuring the success of the Uber campaign, but with a podcast, of course, now we know that Google's going to be looking at indexing it, and we can see success through SERPs. But how do you measure the success of the Search Engine Journal podcast, Search Engine Nerds? How do you know if it's successful or not, besides the use of the code?
Yeah, so we always looked at average downloads for the month. And then also the developer at SEJ, who's really great, his name's Vahan, he set us up with this exclusive RSS feed that could tell us how many people subscribe to the RSS feed. I'm not a coding expert, so I don't remember how it all worked, but that was another metric that let us kind of see who was accessing the RSS feed, because then we could kind of guess at how many subscribers we had. But the monthly downloads was one of our main ways of tracking to figure out if we were growing or not. And growth was, fairly steady. We did find that during the holidays, it kind of went down, December, November, but it was a good increase. So that was motivating for us. We also looked at, for every episode, we published a blog post that had the transcribed podcast. So we used rev.com. They're a really great service. They charge $1 a minute for transcription. So we embedded the podcast episode and then the full transcription. So that was content for us as well. So repurposing in another way through the blog post content. And so looking at the metrics from the blog post as well was another way we looked at success. So if there was a lot of readers for that specific blog post about the podcast, then we knew, oh, this is a topic maybe we should write more long form content on or do more podcast episodes on. So that was kind of another way to help us gauge what episodes were doing well.
That's a great way to evolve your content that you offer readers and see what's been successful in the past and expand what you've done there and open up to new topics. And there's a lot greater depth that we could evolve into that, and hopefully we will in a second. But I mean, first of all, I'd like to tell the listener about contentmarathon.com. So do you want to write better, more, write smarter? Then sign up for Content Marathon. That's an intense week-long writing course brought to you by Semrush and VentureBeat. Content Marathon helps you to build the habits that you need to create awesome written content. And you can also win a MacBook as part of the process. So to find out about that and sign up, visit contentmarathon.com. So let's get back to the topic here, though. And Kelsey, let's just delve a little bit more into, how to actually hone in and define what content is, really successful and isn't. So you mentioned there that you delve into see what content's been popular. What's your process from there to actually decide on how to evolve a future episode title from that?
We looked at time on the article and then just the basic metrics, but then we also kind of combine that with social media as well. So we found that there was some feedback on the podcast using the hashtag, our marketing hashtag on the topics to kind of see people had certain questions or people would tweet us with questions just directly to the SE Journal Twitter handle. And so we kind of use that as a jumping board to kind of figure out what possible topics would work in the future. A few times too, we also set up a Google form that let people suggest topics and what they would want to learn about. And of course, you got the regular trolls and people that were saying ridiculous things, but a lot of the topics were useful and things that we hadn't thought of before. So I think it's important to look at the data and the metrics, of course, but I think if you do have an established audience or customer base like Search Engine Journal does, it's important to involve the community as well, because they want to talk to you and they want to share what they want you to cover. And so we made sure to make that a priority when it came to topic ideation.
And those are some really good ideas about coming up with topic ideas too. And especially when it's a podcast as well as a blog post, as you've said, you don't always get that feedback in the blog post itself. But that leads me on to our kind of next question, which I do want to toss out to Luis first. What can the listener take from your experience on developing this content strategy and execution for Uber on how they might look at building a long-term content marketing campaign? Are there any tips or tricks or even just like a checklist of things that our listeners should be making note of for their own long-term content marketing campaigns?
Yes, definitely. I have a very long list in my head, but let me try to zero into what makes more impact. I would say that you need to leverage all of your channels that you have access, right? I mean, never underestimate, for example, what Kelsey was mentioning about social listening and trying to understand what are the concerns and the needs of your users or your consumers at the moment, so you can actually direct your topics towards there, right? I think that's fantastic. The second one is like, don't depend solely on one source, I would suggest, because for example, as we are more focusing to SEO, sometimes we in ride sharing, you don't find that high search volumes, right? Or even in some new products, something innovative, some new service tends to have very low search volumes, and a lot of people will tend to discard that, right? But we need to understand if there are certain kind of concerns or other sources where we can put together that, right? Maybe like the safety in Latin America about ride sharing was not a concern 10 years ago because it didn't exist, right? So now we can move on to that. And the third thing is like, never stop iterating, never stop reinforcing the messages that you're sending out there. because I think that it's something extremely valuable. So kind of a trick that I would suggest is that we actually use Agile within our sort of planning and strategies. So we try to mimic what a product team would do in terms of ideation, in terms of stating a problem, making sure that all of our strategies are actually solving a problem for our users. So we found that through Agile, Kanban, and all of this product organization, we find ourselves in more efficient positions. We find ourselves finding more synergies with other teams and with other channels. So that would be my take.
Lewis, we've got Everything Birds asking in the YouTube chat, what are your favorite platforms for social listening?
For social listening, right? I'm not sure how restricted I am to share some of those. But at the moment, we are doing something internally, right? So I think that there's a lot of different tools that can help you aggregate that.
What are the metrics that are most important for you to keep an eye on?
Right, definitely sentiment. Definitely, it's one of them in which we try to understand what is the actual sentiment that the people have at the moment. Where also we try to flag situations in which we can actually help out. So that's a little bit of what we do here.
Wonderful stuff. And just a follow-up question in relation to your content campaign. You give lots of great tips that people can take away there, but I'm sure there's something that you do differently next time. So is there any mistake that you made or thing that you learned from as a result of doing that you do differently next time?
Yes, definitely. One of the learnings that we are having at the moment is to leverage a lot more product on these things, right? I think that we all know that organic growth comes about leveraging your product and how the product can scale up from that. So we are definitely considering to move into integrating a lot more content with a web experience embedded into it. At the moment, a bit of a preview, Uber has been very involved into Carnival in Brazil, for example. So we expect that we're going to provide a better experience now in the upcoming year for the people down there. So,
Lewis,
yeah.
sorry, just before we progress, your audio is starting to cut out a little bit there. Can you just try something for me? Can you go into your settings icon at the top and actually change your microphone to something else and click save, and then go back to the actual microphone that you should be on, and just to see if that resolves it. It might not, but we'll give that a little go. Just in the meantime, I'll just go to Kelsey. Kelsey, in relation to the podcast, I'm sure it evolved a lot over the 4 years or so that you've done it. What are things that you've learned as a result of doing it that you actually did for previous episodes and actually you wouldn't do for future episodes because it either didn't work for you, or listening back to it, it wasn't as effective as you thought it might be?
Well, since I'm not doing it anymore, I can only think about, what I would do in the future. And I think we had a ton of really great guests. And so I would maybe think about a strategy where we could utilize them more. So we had a few great guests on multiple times. And so thinking about, could we turn this into some sort of series where they could share even more of their expertise if there was a lot of downloads for a specific episode. And then also, I think talking to people before the podcast starts is really important. So we would get on and I would share the basics and then we'd record. But I think sometimes people weren't as natural recording the podcast maybe as you thought they would be. So maybe talking to them, maybe for 10 minutes before we started recording can be a good way to kind of get them a little bit more comfortable, because I think a lot of people that have interesting things to share get a little nervous if they haven't done a lot of podcasts or interviews before. And so kind of helping them get more comfortable, I think, would make for better episodes.
That's a great tip. Not naming any names, certain people turn up about 30 seconds beforehand, and you can't necessarily do that with everyone. But yeah, it's a great idea to do that. One other question. What would you say are the up-and-coming platforms that you'd consider for your next content marketing campaign? Because we've seen platforms that are evolving or growing or becoming more popular, like Instagram, perhaps. Are there any platforms that have caught your eye that you think that you would use more of for a future content marketing campaign?
So I know BuzzSumo has been around for a while, but I like researching the social share numbers that they give for certain topics, because that kind of gives you an overview of what people are sharing on social media. And then I recently had a client, they are a recipe app. I can't talk about who it is, but they use ClearScope, and it's a content marketing tool that basically will look, you put in a keyword and it gives you the top content in that keyword and certain keywords that are mentioned in those top articles. So maybe you should think about including those in yours. So it's kind of a content competitor analysis tool. And I really enjoyed using that when I was working on a content development campaign for the recipe client. What else? I think one thing, and this I guess goes a little bit off base from what you asked me, but I've seen more and more just with contracts and even just, browsing open jobs in content marketing. A lot of companies are asking for writers and content marketers to be better versed in SEO. And so I think anything, if you think that you're just a writer or just a content marketer, I think I see the industry shifting to you need to know SEO. And it's no longer okay to just be a writer that writes for content online and doesn't know anything about SEO. So if you do see yourself as a content marketer, learning more about SEO, whether that's the Semrush blog or Search Engine Journal, of course, or Search Engine Land. PPC Hero is good for paid search content. Just kind of educating yourself on SEO best practices, I think, is really important too.
Lewis, I'd love to get your perspective from working for a very big brand like Uber. I could imagine that certain things are great and easy to do. Other things that you may want to do are more challenging to do. Can you give tips to people that work for a big brand and they want to do something, but they have to get buy-in from lots of different departments and justify doing things? Have you ever had to justify perhaps some SEO involvement in a content campaign or doing a campaign and the value that you'd get from it internally within Uber?
Right. So it's a very interesting question, and I would say just go and get the agreement that you need to get it. I would strongly suggest to get those alignments across the board, because unfortunately SEO is something that it has been undermined since it's born, right? And sometimes in larger organization, it's harder to see the value into a brand campaign, for example, right? That are very delicate or that have a lot of different touch points. So I would say that you need to rely on your data to get that agreement. I think that is very, very important that you leverage out all the different metrics that you can have to include SEO into the conversation, right? To give an example, in the safety campaign, there was no real big vision to say how many people are actually wondering if it's safe to use Uber in Mexico City, right? If it's safe to do that. So I think that those numbers are very convincing, because Speakly directs about the number of people that you're touching, right? So I think that that's extremely important.
So time now for an actionable tip from each of our guests related to, or not necessarily related to, what we've been discussing so far. So let's go back to Kelsey first. Kelsey, what's your actionable tip?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so if you are having trouble writing or you have writer's block, because sometimes I'll have to write, a 2,000 word article on B2B marketing or something that helps me is I use Google Docs, and then I use voice typing, and I will create my headers and then just kind of write the article by voice. And that helps me just get something out on paper. And of course, I have to go back and add sources and clean it up. But that would be the first thing I could think of that I think a lot of people aren't doing, and it actually can help you turn out some valuable content quickly.
Or if you're having problems writing, go to contentmarathon.com. That's probably a great tie-in as well there. You can find Kelsey over at 6stories.com. That's SIX stories.com.
And of course, next up, it's Luis. So it's your turn. What's your actionable tip?
Learn Agile. It's just a blessing to implement in your life. It's a blessing to implement in any sort of content marketing campaign or anything else that you do. Think about MVPs. Think about getting it done. I think that's the main message. It's important to send products out there, to send strategies out there, and to learn from them.
Oh, fantastic. And Luis is the Web and SEO Lead for Uber. in Latin America. So you can find him over on LinkedIn. And I've been Judith Lewis, your co-host. And currently you can find me in Toronto, but online you can find me at decabit.com.
I've been David Bain, your other co-host. You can also find me over at businessbookofthemonth.com. On next week's show, we're going to be sharing a success story from an SEO industry superstar.
Joining us for that episode will be the 20-year search veteran and fellow Canuck, VP of Industry Insights at Yext, Dwayne Forrester. Unfortunately, I won't be in Toronto at the time. Make sure, though, that you sign up to receive that audio podcast as soon as it's released over on semrush.com/podcast. That is semrush.com/podcast.
Thanks for joining us for this one, dear listener. Until next time, be fantabulous and do one thing that scares you. Adios.